There's a specific genre of stories that I've absolutely fallen in love with recently, and those stories can be described as the Villainess ultimate game, noblewoman, whatever you want to call it, style of stories. Now for me, the main character doesn't have to be a villainess, nor does the story have to be an isekai that takes place in a video game or a novel. I just love the aesthetic of these types of stories so much and was looking for a way to describe them. These stories for me are always amazing and I don't really know why. I just love the badass female leads who have two sides of their personalities, one where they blend into high society well, and the other where they have to use any number of personalities from twisted to revenge driven. Maybe they're trying to prevent a calamity from destroying the planet, or maybe it's just a secret love interest. Either way, the main lead often has to hide their true intentions behind a mask, and seeing that play out throughout these stories is always awesome. These series often lead down many different paths. Some are drama focused, some are comedies, some even have some action in them, but one of my favorite things about this genre is the romance that we often get to see in these series. I don't know why, but I love seeing strong, stoic, noble men fall in love with the female lead and have their personalities completely shift from what they outwardly show to people. Oftentimes, this leads to the male lead being clingy or overly protective of the female lead without realizing that the female lead can often handle herself in a lot of situations. There's so much I love about this genre of stories, from how diverse it can be to how the setting is shown. These stories are always some of my all-time favorite series. I often seek them of my own accord because I love reading them that much. For the first time in my life because of this genre, I read not one, not two, but 3 full novel series to completion and have started a 4th. Which is really surprising because before this, I have never really read any books in my life. I want to talk about some of these series and what makes them so good in my eyes. Of course, not everyone will agree with some of my favorite series, but that's okay. I just want to talk about series that have hooked me in an insane amount from start to finish. Before we continue talking about these series, it would be awesome if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I make new anime, manga, and webtoon content every single week on a variety of different topics and series. Alright, the first series I want to talk about is actually one of the novels I read, called The Villainess vs. the Hourglass. This series does have a manga adaptation, however. I read the novel for this series. I don't even know where to begin with this series, it is so good. The character writing in this series is great. Every character plays an important role in the story and all of their personalities reflect the characters perfectly. The way characters develop throughout the course of the series is incredible, as some characters grow closer while others are growing further apart, as some of them are being used as pawns, others are forming alliances. Everything this series does, it does so well. The main character Arya is such a badass who doesn't take shit from anyone. She is extremely intelligent and uses her knowledge to her advantage to form plans to topple her enemies and get revenge. She is also able to think on the fly and come up with new strategies if old ones don't work. She has a quick temper, but she's also level-headed. Her character throughout the series is always so amazing to watch, and as she develops and starts growing closer to some of the other characters, we start to see her stubbornness go down as well. What I love about Arya specifically is that despite all of her intelligence, she still has to rely on others as she isn't very physically strong, which especially early on makes this series really interesting to read as we get to see her deal with a lot of struggles that are a lot harder to get through when you have no one to care for you. The story in this series is godlike. The way the story events weave into each other perfectly is insane. We have characters introduced at the perfect times to add tension to the story, we get backstories we didn't know we needed to build upon the already great characters. Everything we get to see from this series is great. It establishes a world and uses it to perfection. There are a lot of events throughout the series that could only happen if they took place in a fictional world, like the main story device, which I won't spoil. But I will say, unlike a lot of other series that have used this story device, this series uses it perfectly to make the whole story come together in a very great way. This series is great, and I would love it if more people read this series because you definitely won't be disappointed. There are many different types of stories in this genre, from reincarnation to revenge to even just your typical romance stories. This time I'm going to be talking about one of those. It's actually an anime that just recently aired, but I still want to talk about this series anyway. The series' title is I'm the Villainess, so I'm taming the final boss. This series was a great romance series to watch. I loved the characters in it. All of them had fun personalities that made the anime really entertaining, especially the main character Eileen. She was funny, serious, badass, stubborn, and a crybaby all at the same time. That made her character super interesting to watch. She wasn't super smart, but she used the knowledge that she had and her kind behavior to persuade people to her side and help stop the calamities from happening. I do find all of the characters' development towards Eileen to be kinda funny, starting out as either hateful or distrustful until they get to know her, where they start to open up a lot more. This makes for some really great character interactions throughout the series, where she takes her whole group of men and does a bunch of stupid shit. This series had a great balance between comedy and seriousness that you don't get to see from a lot of series. It was mostly a comedy, but when it got serious, it typically stayed serious and didn't get interrupted by some comedy that doesn't belong. The story was also quite interesting as it takes a lot of stereotypical tropes and flips them on their head to mix for some really good comedy. This allows for the series to not be a generic mess of a series and instead becomes a pretty funny, unique, and weird isekai romance anime. This series knew what it was and it didn't try to be anything more than that, which is how a good series is formed, because if a series tries to do too much, sometimes it can fall flat on everything it was trying to do. I would say if you want a great romantic comedy series with a protagonist that has a crazy personality, then this series is right up your alley. There are so many different types of series in this genre. I mentioned 2 where the protagonists were villainesses, but there are plenty of other series that isn't the case. Series like From a Knight to a Lady, Your Throne, Wished You Were Dead, Dear Nemesis, and so many more series like it. All of these series aren't really Villainess Ultimate Game style series, however, they have the same feel to them as a series like that, with similar settings and character tropes, as well as most importantly having a female main character. All of these series are series that I love, and I can't wait to see more series pop up that I can experience in the future. This genre very easily became my favorite of any other, and I am not ashamed to admit that.